I knew something was wrong the second I walked out my front door and saw the empty space where my snowblower should have been sitting in my driveway. My name is Vincent Grayson, and I had lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for about 3 years at that point. It was January 2025, and we had just gotten absolutely hammered with about 18 inches of snow overnight. The forecast had called for another storm coming through in the next few days, which was exactly why I had left my Honda snowblower out after clearing my driveway the previous evening. I knew I would need it again soon, and my garage was packed with my woodworking equipment, leaving little room for the bulky machine. Now it was gone. I stood there in my boots and heavy coat, staring at the spot where I had definitely left it. The snow around the area was disturbed, showing clear tracks where someone had wheeled it away. My blood started to boil as I followed the tracks with my eyes. They led directly across my front lawn, down the sidewalk, and disappeared around the corner toward Maple Drive. The snowblower had not been cheap. I had dropped nearly $1,200 on that thing just 2 winters ago, and it ran like a dream. It had the electric start, heated handles, LED headlights, and could chew through the heaviest, wettest snow Michigan could throw at it. More importantly, it was mine, and someone had the audacity to just take it from my property. I pulled out my phone and was about to call the police when I remembered something that made me smile. About 6 months earlier, I had read a news story about someone who recovered their stolen trailer using a GPS tracker. The idea had stuck with me, and being somewhat paranoid about theft after my neighbor 2 streets over had his generator stolen, I had ordered a small, battery-powered GPS tracker online. It was one of those units designed for tracking vehicles or valuable equipment, with a battery that could last for weeks and real-time location updates through a smartphone app. I had tucked it inside the engine housing of my snowblower, hidden in a spot where nobody would find it unless they were specifically looking for it or completely disassembling the machine. The tracker sent me low battery alerts, and I would pull it out to recharge it every couple of weeks when I was doing maintenance. Standing there in the cold, I quickly opened the tracking app on my phone. My heart was pounding as the app loaded, showing a map of my neighborhood. A little blue dot appeared on the screen and it was moving. I zoomed in and watched as the dot slowly progressed along Maple Drive, then turned onto Oakwood Lane. "You have got to be kidding me," I muttered, watching the tracker's path. Whoever had stolen my snowblower was not even trying to get it out of the neighborhood quickly. They were taking their sweet time, probably pushing it through the snow-covered sidewalks. I decided to follow at a distance, curiosity getting the better of me. I wanted to see exactly where my snowblower was going before I called the police. I walked quickly down the sidewalk, my phone in my hand, watching the blue dot on the screen. The morning was cold and quiet, with most of my neighbors probably still inside drinking coffee and preparing to tackle their own driveways. The dot stopped moving after about 5 minutes. I checked the address on the map and felt my stomach drop. The tracker was showing a location on Oakwood Lane, just 3 streets away from my house. The address was 847 Oakwood Lane. That was Rebecca Morrison's house. Of course it was. Rebecca Morrison was the president of our homeowners association and the absolute worst kind of busybody. She was in her early 50s, with the signature haircut that somehow all these types seem to have. The kind where they want to speak to managers and make everyone's life miserable. She had been HOA president for the past 4 years, and in that time, she had made it her personal mission to make sure every single rule and regulation was followed to the letter, no matter how petty or absurd. I had run into issues with Rebecca before. Last summer, She had sent me a violation notice because my grass was allegedly 1 inch taller than the allowed height according to HOA guidelines. I had measured it myself with a ruler and found that it was perfectly within the limits, but that had not stopped her from sending a follow-up letter threatening fines. Then there was the incident with my mailbox, which she claimed was the wrong shade of black. It was black. The HOA rules said it had to be black, but apparently my mailbox was midnight black when it should have been true black, whatever the hell that meant. I had ignored that letter and eventually she had given up, but stealing my snowblower, that was a whole different level of crazy. I walked toward her house, staying on the opposite side of the street to avoid being seen. Rebecca's house was a large colonial-style home with white siding and black shutters, perfectly maintained like something out of a magazine. Her driveway and walkway were completely covered in snow, untouched. That struck me as odd. Why would someone steal a snowblower and then not use it immediately on their own property? I watched her house for a few minutes, standing behind a large pine tree in her neighbor's yard. I felt a bit ridiculous, like some kind of amateur detective, but I wanted to be absolutely sure before I got the police involved. The last thing I needed was to accuse the HOA president of theft if I was somehow wrong about the tracker's location. Then I saw her garage door start to open. I ducked further behind the tree and watched as Rebecca herself appeared in the opening, wearing a long, puffy coat and winter boots. She looked around nervously, which immediately confirmed my suspicions. If she had nothing to hide, why would she be acting so sketchy? She disappeared back into the garage and the door closed again. I waited another minute, then checked my phone. The GPS tracker was still showing the same location, definitely inside or very near her garage. That was all the confirmation I needed. I pulled up the non-emergency police number for Grand Rapids and made the call. The dispatcher answered on the third ring, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. I would like to report a theft. My snowblower was stolen from my driveway this morning, and I have GPS tracking that shows it is currently at a neighbor's house. The dispatcher took down my information and the address where the snowblower was located. When I mentioned that it was the HOA president's house, I heard a slight change in her tone, like she was suddenly more interested. Officers will be there within 20 minutes. Can you meet them at your residence? Actually, I am already near the location where the snowblower is. Can they meet me here? She confirmed that they could, and I gave her the cross streets. After hanging up, I stayed behind the tree, keeping watch on Rebecca's house. I was not about to let her move my snowblower somewhere else before the cops arrived. True to their word, 2 police cruisers arrived about 18 minutes later. I stepped out from behind the tree and waved them down before they could pull up directly in front of Rebecca's house. The officers got out, and I quickly walked over to meet them. The first officer was a tall guy in his 30s with a no-nonsense expression. His name tag read Officer Patterson. The second was a woman, shorter and stockier, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her tag said Officer Ramirez. "You are Vincent Grayson?" Patterson asked. "That is me. Thanks for coming so quickly. You said your snowblower was stolen and you tracked it here." Ramirez gestured toward Rebecca's house. "Exactly. I have a GPS tracker hidden on the machine. It is showing that it is in that garage right now." I pulled out my phone and showed them the app with the blue dot clearly marking Rebecca's address. Patterson studied the screen, then nodded. "That is pretty smart. Okay, let us go talk to the homeowner." We walked up to Rebecca's front door, and Patterson rang the doorbell. I stood slightly behind the officers, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and vindication. I could not wait to see the look on her face when she realized she had been caught. It took about 30 seconds before the door opened. Rebecca stood there in casual clothes now, having apparently changed out of her winter gear. Her expression went from confused to annoyed the second she saw me standing with the police officers. "Can I help you?" she asked in that condescending tone I had heard so many times before at HOA meetings. "Madam, I am Officer Patterson with the Grand Rapids Police Department. We are investigating a reported theft. May we ask you a few questions?" Rebecca's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, indignation, and then what looked like carefully controlled neutrality. "A theft? I do not understand. What does this have to do with me?" "This gentleman reports that his snowblower was stolen from his property this morning," Patterson said, gesturing to me. "He has GPS tracking that indicates the item is currently in your garage. Would you mind if we took a look?" "That is absolutely ridiculous," Rebecca said, her voice rising. "I would never steal anything from anyone, and I resent the implication. This is clearly some kind of misunderstanding or a malfunction with his tracking device." "Then you would not mind us checking your garage to clear this up," Ramirez said. It was not a question. Rebecca hesitated, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew she was trapped. If she refused, she would look guilty. If she let them look, they would find my snowblower. "I want to call my lawyer first." "Madam, you are certainly within your rights to do that," Patterson said patiently. "But I should let you know that if you refuse to cooperate, we can obtain a search warrant. The GPS evidence gives us probable cause. That will take time, and it might be easier to just clear this up now if there has been a misunderstanding." I could see the exact moment Rebecca realized she was screwed. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and the defiant expression slipped from her face. "Fine. You can look in the garage. But I want it noted that I am cooperating fully, and that I have no idea how his snowblower ended up there if it is even there at all." "Noted," Ramirez said, pulling out a small notepad. Rebecca led us around the side of her house to the garage. She punched a code into a keypad on the exterior wall, and the garage door slowly began to rise. As it opened, I felt a surge of satisfaction. There, sitting in the middle of her 3-car garage, was my red Honda snowblower, looking exactly as I had left it. "That is it," I said immediately. "That is my snowblower." "Are you certain?" Patterson asked. "Absolutely. I can show you the serial number on my purchase receipt if you need verification. Plus, the GPS tracker is hidden inside the engine housing." Rebecca was silent now, staring at the snowblower like she could not believe it was actually there, or maybe she could not believe she had been caught. "Madam," Patterson said, his tone more serious now, "do you have an explanation for why this snowblower is in your garage?" Rebecca started, then stopped. She looked at me, then at the officers, then back at the snowblower. "I was going to return it." "You were going to return it," Ramirez repeated flatly. "Yes, I just needed to borrow it for a few hours. My husband is out of town on business, and we do not have a snowblower. I saw this one sitting in Vincent's driveway, and I thought he would not mind if I borrowed it quickly to clear our driveway. I was going to bring it right back." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You thought I would not mind if you stole my $1,200 snowblower from my property without asking. Are you serious right now?" "I was not stealing it," Rebecca insisted, her voice taking on that shrill quality that came out whenever she was challenged at HOA meetings. "I was borrowing it. There is a difference." "Madam, taking someone else's property without permission is theft," Patterson said. "It does not matter what you intended to do with it afterward. This is absurd. We live in the same community. We are neighbors. I am the HOA president, for God's sake." I was trying to maintain my property according to our community standards. Community standards do not include stealing from your neighbors, I shot back. I was done being polite. You could have knocked on my door and asked to borrow it. You could have called me. You could have hired someone to plow your driveway. Instead, you just took it. That is theft, Rebecca. Now wait just a minute, she said, pointing a finger at me. If you had properly stored your equipment in your garage instead of leaving it out like an eyesore, this never would have happened. According to Section 7 of the HOA bylaws, all lawn and garden equipment must be stored in a garage or shed when not in active use. You were in violation. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. Are you seriously trying to blame me for you stealing my snowblower because I left it in my own driveway? I am saying that if you had followed the rules, none of this would be an issue. Officer Ramirez held up a hand. Madam, I am going to stop you right there. What he did or did not do with his property on his own land is not relevant to the fact that you took it without permission. That is theft. Rebecca's face was turning red now. Are you actually going to arrest me over a snowblower that I was going to return? This is a waste of police resources. You should be out catching real criminals. Theft is a real crime, madam, Patterson said. He looked at me. Sir, do you wish to press charges? I did not even have to think about it. Yes, absolutely. Rebecca's mouth dropped open. You cannot be serious. Vincent, be reasonable. I am your HOA president. I have done so much for this community. You are really going to have me arrested over a simple misunderstanding. You stole from me, Rebecca. You did not borrow. You did not ask. You snuck over to my house in the early morning and took my expensive equipment. That is not a misunderstanding. That is theft. Patterson nodded and pulled out his handcuffs. Madam, I am placing you under arrest for larceny. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As he continued reading her Miranda rights, Rebecca's expression went from disbelief to horror to rage. This is ridiculous. I will fight this. I will sue you, she said, looking at me. I will make sure the HOA makes your life a living hell. You have no idea what you are doing. I know exactly what I am doing, I replied calmly. I am holding you accountable for stealing my property. Officer Ramirez turned to me. We are going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement and provide proof of ownership for the snowblower. Do you have the receipt and serial number? I have everything at home. I can go get it right now. That works. We will take her to the station for processing. You can meet us there whenever you are ready. I watched as they put Rebecca in handcuffs and led her to one of the police cruisers. Her face was a mask of fury, and I knew she was serious about making my life difficult. But at that moment, I did not care. She had crossed a line and she needed to face the consequences. After the police left with Rebecca, I retrieved my snowblower from her garage and pushed it back home. Several neighbors had come out of their houses, drawn by the sight of police cruisers. I saw them whispering and pointing, and I knew the neighborhood gossip mill was about to go into overdrive. Mrs. Chen from next door came over as I was rolling the snowblower up my driveway. Vincent, what happened? I saw the police at Rebecca's house. She stole my snowblower, I said simply. The police arrested her. Mrs. Chen's eyes went wide. She what? Rebecca Morrison stole your snowblower. Yep. I had a GPS tracker on it and it led the police right to her garage. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe it. I mean, she can be difficult, but stealing. Believe it. I am going to give my statement at the police station now. I went inside, grabbed my file of receipts and important documents, and found the original purchase receipt for the snowblower along with the manual that had the serial number. Then, I drove to the police station downtown. The statement process took about an hour. I explained the entire situation, provided my evidence, and showed them the GPS tracking app with the complete movement history from my driveway to Rebecca's garage. The officer taking my statement, a detective named Morris, seemed particularly interested in the GPS evidence. "This makes our job a lot easier," Detective Morris said. "Clear chain of custody, time-stamped location data, and you have the receipt with the serial number. This is pretty open and shut." "So what happens now?" I asked. "She will be arraigned probably tomorrow or the next day. The prosecutor will decide what charges to file. Given the value of the snowblower and the circumstances, she is looking at misdemeanor larceny at minimum. She might try to plead it down or get a deal, but with this evidence, I think they will push for a conviction." "Will I have to testify?" "Possibly, if it goes to trial. But honestly, most of these cases end in a plea deal. She would be smart to take one rather than roll the dice with a jury." I thanked Detective Morris and headed home. The whole drive back, I thought about what Rebecca had said about making my life difficult through the HOA. She was still the president, at least for now, and she had a lot of supporters on the board. This was probably going to get ugly before it got better. I was right. The next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, citing me for violation of Section 7, the same rule Rebecca had tried to throw at me when she got caught. According to the notice, I had 24 hours to ensure all equipment was properly stored or face a fine of $50 per day until the violation was corrected. I crumpled up the notice and threw it in the trash. If they wanted to play it that way, fine. I would lawyer up if I had to. Over the next few days, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. I heard through Mrs. Chen that Rebecca had made bail immediately and was back at home. I also heard that an emergency HOA board meeting had been called to discuss recent events and conduct unbecoming of a board member. I was not on the HOA board, but I made it a point to attend that meeting. It was held in the community center on a Wednesday evening, and the room was packed with curious neighbors. I counted at least 40 people, way more than usually showed up for these boring meetings. The board consisted of 5 members: Rebecca as president, a guy named Tom Whitfield as vice president, Sandra Price as secretary, and 2 at-large members named Jeff Kowalski and Linda Hart. They all sat at a long table at the front of the room, and I noticed that Rebecca looked significantly less composed than usual. Her hair was not as perfectly styled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Tom Whitfield called the meeting to order and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know there has been a lot of talk in the community about recent events involving our president, Rebecca Morrison. We have called this meeting to address the situation and discuss next steps. I think she should resign," someone called out from the back. I turned and saw it was Frank Jenkins, an older guy who had butted heads with Rebecca multiple times over the years. "Let us maintain order, please," Tom said. "We will open the floor for comments in a moment. First, Rebecca would like to make a statement." Rebecca stood up, and I could see her hands shaking slightly. She was trying to maintain her usual air of authority, but it was not working. "Thank you. I want to address the accusations that have been made against me. Yes, I made a mistake. I borrowed a piece of equipment from a neighbor without explicitly asking first. It was poor judgment on my part, and I apologize." "You did not borrow it, you stole it," I called out before I could stop myself. Rebecca's eyes snapped to me, full of venom. "I was going to return it, as I explained to the police." "After you got caught." Tom banged his gavel. "Vincent, please. You will have a chance to speak." "I think he already said what we are all thinking," someone else said. The room erupted in crosstalk, with people arguing over each other. Some seemed to be defending Rebecca. saying it was just a misunderstanding and that I was overreacting by having her arrested. But more people seemed to be on my side, pointing out that theft was theft regardless of her intentions. Tom banged the gavel several more times until the room quieted down. We need to discuss this rationally. Rebecca is facing criminal charges, and we need to decide if she should remain as president of the HOA during this process. She should not, Linda Hart spoke up. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and glasses, always one of the more reasonable board members. I move that we place Rebecca on administrative leave pending the resolution of the criminal case. I second that motion, Jeff Kowalski added immediately. Rebecca looked like she had been slapped. You cannot do that. I have done nothing wrong. This is a witch hunt. You were arrested for stealing from a community member, Linda said firmly. That is hardly nothing. The board took a vote, and it was 3-1 in favor of placing Rebecca on administrative leave, with Tom abstaining since he would be taking over as acting president. Rebecca sat back down, her face bright red with anger and embarrassment. This is not over, she said, looking directly at me. Not by a long shot. After the meeting ended, several neighbors came up to me to offer their support. Mrs. Chen told me she was glad I had pressed charges, and Frank Jenkins shook my hand and said it was about time someone stood up to Rebecca's nonsense. But not everyone was on my side. As I was leaving, a woman named Deborah something, one of Rebecca's friends, came up to me and got right in my face. You just could not let it go, could you? You had to humiliate her in front of everyone. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. She stole from me, Deborah. That is not just a mistake. You are destroying her life over a snowblower. I hope you can live with yourself. She stormed off before I could respond, leaving me standing there feeling a mix of vindication and exhaustion. This whole thing was spiraling into a much bigger deal than I had anticipated, but I was not going to back down. Rebecca needed to be held accountable, regardless of her position in the HOA. The criminal case moved forward over the next few weeks. Rebecca's lawyer tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that there was no intent to permanently deprive me of my property, which was technically a requirement for theft under Michigan law. However, the prosecutor argued that her actions met the threshold since she took the property without permission, and only claimed she intended to return it after being caught. The judge sided with the prosecutor, and the case was set for trial. That is when Rebecca's lawyer reached out to me through the prosecutor's office with a plea deal offer. Rebecca would plead guilty to a reduced charge of unauthorized use of property, pay restitution for the full value of the snowblower even though it was returned undamaged, perform 50 hours of community service, and resign from the HOA board. I was fine with everything except the reduced charge. I wanted it on her record as theft, not some watered-down version. The prosecutor explained that going to trial was always a gamble, and this deal ensured a conviction and meaningful consequences. After thinking about it for a few days and talking to some friends and family, I agreed to the deal. Rebecca entered her guilty plea in early February. I was there in the courtroom to watch, and seeing her stand before the judge and admit guilt was satisfying in a way I had not expected. The judge accepted the plea and ordered her to complete the community service within 6 months, pay the restitution within 30 days, and placed her on 6 months of probation. The judge also had some choice words for her. Mrs. Morrison, you held a position of trust and leadership in your community. Your actions represent a serious breach of that trust. I hope you will use this experience to reflect on your behavior and make better choices in the future. Rebecca just nodded, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. After the hearing, I thought that would be the end of it. Rebecca resigned from the HOA board as required by the plea deal, and Tom Whitfield took over as president. I got my restitution check a week later. Everything seemed to be wrapping up nicely. But then things got weird. About 3 weeks after the plea hearing, I started noticing strange things happening around my property. My mailbox was knocked over one night. I assumed it was just kids being stupid and fixed it. Then a few days later, I found trash scattered all over my front lawn. Again, I cleaned it up and did not think too much of it. But when I woke up one morning to find that someone had spray-painted snitch in large red letters across my garage door, I knew this was not random. Someone was retaliating against me for what happened with Rebecca. I called the police and filed a report. They took photos and said they would increase patrols in the area, but without witnesses or security camera footage, there was not much they could do. I decided it was time to invest in some cameras for my property. I installed a complete security system with cameras covering my front door, driveway, garage, and backyard. The setup cost me about $800, but I figured it was worth it for peace of mind. I also made sure to get a system that stored footage in the cloud so that even if someone destroyed the cameras, I would still have the recordings. 2 nights after I installed the cameras, they caught someone red-handed. I woke up at 2 in the morning to an alert on my phone from the security system. Someone was in my driveway. I pulled up the live feed and saw a figure dressed in dark clothing approaching my truck with what looked like a tool in their hand. I immediately called the police and watched through the camera as the person tried to slash my tires. The police arrived within minutes, lights flashing. The person in my driveway tried to run but did not make it far. Officers tackled them in my neighbor's yard, and when they pulled off the ski mask, I was shocked to see it was not Rebecca. It was her husband, David Morrison. I watched from my doorway as they arrested him. He was shouting something about me destroying his wife's reputation and ruining their lives. The officers loaded him into a cruiser, and one of them came to talk to me. "We are going to need that security footage," Officer Patterson said. It was the same officer who had arrested Rebecca. "This is going to be a pretty clear-cut case of vandalism and attempted property damage. Were you the one who painted the message on the garage?" "I do not know," David shouted from the cruiser. "Maybe he deserved it," Patterson shook his head. "That is pretty much a confession. You will need to file another report, but with this video evidence, we should be able to close this quickly." Over the next few days, I learned that David Morrison had also been the one responsible for the other incidents at my property. He admitted to all of it after his arrest, apparently thinking that being honest would somehow help his case. It did not. David was charged with vandalism, attempted vandalism, and criminal trespassing. He took a plea deal as well, probably because the video evidence was ironclad. He got 6 months of probation, had to pay restitution for all the damages including the cost of repainting my garage door, and was ordered to stay away from me and my property. Rebecca, meanwhile, had violated her probation by having her husband harass me, even if she claimed she had not explicitly told him to do it. The prosecutor argued that she had created the environment that led to his actions, and the judge agreed. She got an additional 30 days of community service added to her sentence. The whole ordeal finally seemed to be over by late March. Rebecca and David kept their heads down after that, and I never had any more issues with them. They ended up putting their house on the market in May and moved out of the neighborhood by July. I heard through the grapevine that they relocated to somewhere in Ohio, probably wanting a fresh start away from the embarrassment. The HOA, under Tom Whitfield's leadership, actually became a lot more reasonable. Tom sent out a message to all homeowners acknowledging that the previous administration had sometimes been overly aggressive with enforcement, and that going forward, they would focus on issues that actually mattered to property values and community safety, not petty nonsense like mailbox colors or grass height. I also became somewhat of a minor celebrity in the neighborhood. People would stop me at the community pool or the grocery store to tell me they were glad I had stood up to Rebecca. A few people admitted they had wanted to do the same for years, but were too afraid of retaliation. I became friendly with several neighbors I had only known in passing before, and the community honestly felt a lot more welcoming. The snowblower, the item that started this whole mess, continued to work perfectly. I made sure to store it in my garage when not in use, not because of HOA rules, but just because I did not want to tempt fate. The GPS tracker remained hidden inside it, just in case. By the time winter rolled around again in late 2025, the whole incident felt like a distant memory. We had a new HOA president. My property was peaceful, and I had not received a single petty violation notice in months. I had even been elected to the HOA board myself at the annual meeting in October, mostly because people trusted me to keep things reasonable and fair. The first major snowstorm of that winter hit in December. I fired up my snowblower and cleared my driveway, then did Mrs. Chen's driveway next door since she was elderly and could not handle the heavy work herself. Then, I did the driveway across the street for a young couple with a new baby. As I was finishing up, Tom Whitfield pulled up in his truck and rolled down the window. "Hey, Vincent, you are making the rest of us look bad," he joked. "Just being neighborly," I said. "That is what it is all about." "Say, we are having a board meeting next week to discuss snow removal for the common areas. You going to be there?" "Definitely." "Good deal. Hey, that is a nice snowblower. Where did you get it?" I laughed. "It has got quite a story behind it." "I bet it does. See you next week." As Tom drove off, I stood in the cold, looking around at the neighborhood. The houses were decorated with Christmas lights, smoke curled from chimneys, and everything felt peaceful. It was hard to believe that less than a year ago, I had been standing in roughly this same spot, discovering my snowblower had been stolen and starting a chain of events that would result in criminal charges, harassment, and eventually, positive change for the entire community. The whole experience had taught me some valuable lessons. First, that sometimes standing up for yourself, even when it is uncomfortable, is the right thing to do. I could have just let Rebecca get away with taking my snowblower, writing it off as not worth the hassle. But by holding her accountable, I had not only gotten justice for myself, but had helped create positive change for everyone in the neighborhood. Second, I learned the importance of evidence. If I had not had that GPS tracker on my snowblower, it would have been my word against Rebecca's, and as HOA president, she probably would have been believed over me. The tracker provided undeniable proof of what happened and where my property was located. It was a $100 device that made all the difference. Third, I learned that positions of authority do not put people above the law. Rebecca had clearly felt entitled to take my property because of her position in the HOA. She thought the rules did not apply to her the same way they applied to everyone else. The criminal justice system proved otherwise. Finally, I learned that most people are decent and reasonable when given the chance. Once Rebecca was gone, the HOA became a much better organization focused on actual community improvement rather than petty power trips. People were friendlier, more willing to help each other, and the neighborhood felt like a real community rather than just a collection of houses with a bunch of rules. I finished clearing the last bit of snow from my driveway and rolled the snowblower back into my garage. making sure to park it in its designated spot. My woodworking equipment was now more neatly organized along the walls, leaving plenty of room for the snowblower and my other seasonal equipment. I had spent a weekend in the fall rearranging everything, building some wall-mounted storage racks, and generally making the garage more functional. As I was unhooking the battery cables to store the snowblower for the night, I noticed the GPS tracker tucked in its hiding spot inside the engine housing. The little green light blinked steadily, indicating it was still active and charged. I smiled and left it where it was. Better safe than sorry, even if the chances of another theft were basically zero now. That evening, I settled onto my couch with a beer and turned on a hockey game. The Red Wings were playing, and I was content to just relax and enjoy the evening. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Thank you for doing my driveway. You are a wonderful neighbor. I made some cookies if you want to stop by later." I texted back that I would love some cookies and would come by in a bit. It was nice having good relationships with my neighbors. Before the whole Rebecca situation, I had mostly kept to myself, not unfriendly but not particularly social either. Now I actually knew most of the people on my street, and we looked out for each other. The next morning I got a call from Detective Morris, the detective who had handled my case. I was surprised to hear from him since everything had been resolved months ago. "Vincent, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Rebecca Morrison filed a lawsuit against you in civil court." My stomach dropped. "What? For what?" "Defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She is claiming that you maliciously prosecuted her, damaged her reputation, and caused her severe emotional harm. That is insane. She stole my snowblower. Everything that happened was a direct result of her own actions." "I know that, and the lawsuit is almost certainly going to be thrown out, but I wanted you to be aware so you are not blindsided when you get served with papers. You should probably talk to a lawyer, just to be safe." I thanked him for the heads up and immediately called a lawyer friend of mine, Paul Richardson. Paul primarily did real estate law, but he referred me to a colleague who specialized in civil litigation. By the end of the day, I had a consultation scheduled for the following week. The lawsuit, when I finally saw the actual documents, was even more ridiculous than I imagined. Rebecca claimed I had orchestrated a campaign of harassment against her, that I had intentionally caused her arrest to satisfy a personal vendetta, and that my actions had caused her severe mental anguish, depression, and anxiety. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Amanda Chen, who was no relation to my neighbor, reviewed the documents and actually laughed out loud when she got to the damages section. "This is not going to go anywhere," Amanda said. "First of all, truth is an absolute defense to defamation. You did not make false statements about her. She actually did steal your snowblower. Second, you did not maliciously prosecute her. You reported a crime, provided evidence, and the justice system handled it from there. Third, any emotional distress she suffered was a natural consequence of her own criminal behavior. This is what we call a SLAPP suit." "A what?" "Strategic lawsuit against public participation." It is basically a lawsuit designed to intimidate you into silence or to punish you for exercising your legal rights. Michigan actually has anti-SLAPP laws that allow us to get these dismissed quickly and potentially recover our attorney fees from the person who filed it. So what do? We file a motion to dismiss under the anti-SLAPP statute. I am about 99% sure the judge will grant it, and then we can go after her for our legal fees if you want to. We filed the motion to dismiss in early January, and the hearing was scheduled for late February. Rebecca's lawyer, A guy who seemed like he knew the case was garbage but was getting paid anyway made a half-hearted argument that there were genuine issues of fact that required a trial. The judge was not buying it. "Counselor, your client pleaded guilty to a criminal charge arising from the exact same conduct that forms the basis of this lawsuit," the judge said. "She admitted in open court that she took the plaintiff's property without permission. I do not see how she can now claim that reporting her crime was defamation or malicious prosecution." Rebecca's lawyer stammered something about emotional distress being a separate issue, but the judge cut him off. Motion to dismiss is granted. Furthermore, I am awarding attorney fees to the defendant under Michigan's anti-SLAPP statute. Miss Morrison, you and your counsel are ordered to pay Mr. Grayson's reasonable attorney fees within 30 days. This lawsuit was frivolous and appears to have been filed solely to harass the defendant for exercising his legal rights. I could see Rebecca in the gallery, and she looked like she was about to cry. Part of me felt bad for her, but mostly I just felt relieved that this whole nightmare was finally over for real this time. Amanda's fees came to about $3,500, which Rebecca and her lawyer were ordered to split. I got a check 6 weeks later after some back and forth. I used part of it to take Amanda out for a nice dinner to thank her for her help, and the rest I put toward a new table saw for my woodworking hobby. Spring arrived, and with it came the annual HOA elections. Tom Whitfield was running for president officially, having served as acting president for the past year. There was no opposition, and he won easily. The other board positions were filled by a mix of returning members and new people who seemed genuinely interested in serving the community rather than wielding power. At the first board meeting of the new term, Tom proposed eliminating some of the more ridiculous rules that Rebecca had championed. Things like the mailbox color requirements, restrictions on certain types of lawn decorations, and the overly specific grass height requirements. The board voted unanimously to remove those rules and replace them with more general guidelines focused on keeping properties well maintained without being tyrannical about it. We also voted to create a hardship fund to help elderly or disabled homeowners with things like snow removal and lawn care. Mrs. Chen was one of the first people to benefit from it, with the HOA arranging and paying for regular lawn service during the summer and snow removal during the winter. It felt good to be part of an organization that actually helped people rather than just harassing them. By summer, the neighborhood felt like a completely different place. There were more block parties, more kids playing outside, and a general sense of community that had not existed before. People were not afraid of getting violation notices for minor things, so they actually spent time outside and got to know their neighbors. I was sitting on my front porch one evening in July, drinking a beer and watching the sunset, when Mrs. Chen came over with a plate of cookies. "I wanted to thank you again for everything you did," she said, sitting in the chair next to me. "You do not need to keep thanking me, Mrs. Chen. I was just standing up for myself." "Maybe so, but you changed things for all of us. This neighborhood is so much better now. I actually enjoy living here again." "I am glad. Want a beer?" she laughed. "Why not?" We sat there talking as the sun went down, and I reflected on how much had changed in the past year and a half. A simple case of theft had spiraled into a whole drama involving arrests, lawsuits, harassment, and ultimately positive change for an entire community. It was not how I expected things to go when I first noticed my snowblower was missing, but I would not change any of it. Well, maybe I would have preferred not to have my garage door vandalized, but even that led to me installing a security system that gave me peace of mind. The snowblower sat in my garage, ready for the next winter. The GPS tracker was still in place, still charged, still monitoring its location. I knew I would probably never need it again, but I left it there anyway. It was a reminder that sometimes preparation and planning can make all the difference. As fall arrived and the leaves started to change, I found myself actually looking forward to winter and the first snowfall. Not because I enjoyed shoveling or dealing with cold weather, but because it would be a chance to help my neighbors, to be part of the community, and to use the equipment that had inadvertently started a chain of events leading to positive change. When the first snow did fall in late November, I was ready. I fired up the snowblower at dawn and cleared my driveway, then Mrs. Chen's, then the young couple across the street, and then several other neighbors who I knew would appreciate the help. It took me about 3 hours to do everyone's driveways, and I refused all offers of payment. This was what neighbors did for each other. As I was finishing up the last driveway, Tom Whitfield pulled up again, just like the year before. "You are at it again, I see." "Someone has to set a good example," I joked. "Well, you are definitely doing that. Hey, I wanted to let you know that the board voted last night to name you Homeowner of the Year. We are giving out the award at the Winter Social next month." I was genuinely surprised. Seriously. I do not know what to say. "You earned it, Vincent. You stood up for what was right, even when it was hard, and you have been a great board member. The award comes with a plaque and a gift certificate to that steakhouse downtown." "I appreciate that, thank you." After Tom left, I put the snowblower away and went inside to warm up. My whole body ached from the physical work, but it was a good kind of ache. I made some coffee and sat by the window, watching as neighbors emerged to clear their walkways or just to enjoy the fresh snow. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a second, my stomach tightened, worried it might be Rebecca or David causing trouble again. But when I opened it, I saw it was from Detective Morris. "Heard you are getting an award from your HOA. Well deserved." That GPS tracker was one of the smartest things I have seen in a case. "Take care." I smiled and texted back my thanks. It was nice to know that the police appreciated citizens who made their jobs easier. The Winter Social came a few weeks later, held in the community center with about 100 people in attendance. There were refreshments, music, and a general festive atmosphere. When Tom called me up to receive the Homeowner of the Year award, I got a standing ovation. It was embarrassing and gratifying at the same time. "Vincent Grayson represents the best of what our community can be," Tom said as he handed me the plaque. "He stands up for what is right, he helps his neighbors, and he serves on our board with integrity and fairness. We are lucky to have him." I said a few words thanking everyone and emphasizing that any of them would have done the same thing in my position. I do not know if that was true, but it seemed like the right thing to say. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to shake my hand and chat. Some of them told me their own stories of dealing with Rebecca's tyrannical rule over the HOA. One guy said she had fined him 3 times in 1 month for having his garbage cans visible from the street, even though he had them behind a fence. A woman told me Rebecca had tried to force her to remove a basketball hoop from her driveway because it was not aesthetically pleasing. Hearing these stories made me realize that Rebecca had been far worse than I had thought, and that my case had opened the floodgates for people to finally talk about their experiences. It also made me grateful that I had installed that GPS tracker. Without it, Rebecca probably would have gotten away with stealing my snowblower, and she would have continued her reign of petty tyranny for who knows how many more years. As the party wound down, I found myself talking with Linda Hart, the board member who had first moved to place Rebecca on administrative leave. "You know, I am glad you did what you did," she said. A lot of us on the board knew Rebecca was out of control, but we did not know how to stop her. She was very good at wielding the rules to get her way. Your case gave us the opening we needed to make real changes. I am glad something good came out of it, I said. Though I wish it had not required me getting my stuff stolen, Linda laughed. True, but you handled it perfectly. You had evidence, you followed the law, and you did not back down when she tried to intimidate you. That took courage. Or stubbornness. I am not always sure which. Maybe both. Either way, it worked out. I drove home that night feeling genuinely happy. The plaque sat on my passenger seat, and I was already thinking about where to hang it in my house. Maybe in my garage near where I parked the snowblower. That would be fitting. The rest of that winter passed uneventfully. We had several more snowstorms, and I continued my routine of clearing driveways for my neighbors. The community continued to thrive under Tom's leadership, and the HOA board focused on actual improvements like fixing streetlights, organizing neighborhood events, and maintaining the common areas. By the time spring arrived again, I realized that I had completely moved on from the Rebecca situation. I did not think about it every day anymore. It was just a thing that had happened, a challenge I had faced and overcome. The snowblower was just a snowblower again, not a symbol of anything except my need to clear my driveway when it snowed. But I kept the GPS tracker in place, just in case, because you never know when being prepared will make all the difference. One afternoon in early March, I was in my garage working on a woodworking project when Mrs. Chen came over with her grandson, a kid about 8 years old named Marcus. Vincent, Marcus has a school project about community heroes, and he wanted to interview you. Would you have a few minutes? Sure, come on in. Marcus had a list of questions written in careful handwriting on notebook paper. He asked me why I had put a GPS tracker on my snowblower, how I felt when I discovered it was stolen, and what I learned from the whole experience. I answered his questions as honestly as I could, trying to keep things age-appropriate but not talking down to him. When he asked what advice I would give to other people, I told him, stand up for yourself when someone does something wrong, even if that person has power or authority. But do it the right way with evidence and through proper channels. That way, you are not the bad guy. They are. Marcus wrote everything down carefully, then looked up at me. Were you scared when you confronted the lady who took your snowblower? A little bit, I admitted. Not physically scared, but worried about what would happen after. I knew she would be angry with me. But sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that some people will be mad at you. He nodded seriously, like he understood exactly what I meant. Mrs. Chen looked proud of both of us. After they left, I went back to my woodworking, but Marcus's question stuck with me. Had I been scared? Not of Rebecca herself, but certainly of the fallout. I had worried about retaliation, about being harassed by the HOA, about becoming a pariah in my own neighborhood. Those fears had all come true to some extent, but they had also been temporary. In the long run, standing up for myself had been the right call. I thought about people who do not stand up for themselves when wronged, who let things slide because it is easier or because they are afraid of conflict. I understood that impulse. Before the snowblower incident, I probably would have been one of those people. But sometimes life forces you to take a stand, and you discover you are stronger than you thought. The GPS tracker, that simple little device, had been the key to everything. It transformed my claim from an unprovable accusation into an open and shut case. It was funny how something so small could have such a big impact. I made a mental note to put trackers on my other expensive equipment too. My lawnmower, my generator, maybe even my bike. It was cheap insurance, and as I had learned, it really worked. As summer approached, Tom Whitfield announced he was stepping down as HOA president due to job commitments. He recommended me as his replacement, and after some consideration, I agreed to run. The election was in October, and I won with about 70% of the vote. Being HOA president was not something I had ever imagined doing, but it felt right. I knew what bad leadership looked like, and I was determined to be different. My first act was to create an online portal where homeowners could submit concerns or questions anonymously. My second was to establish clear guidelines for when violations would result in fines versus just friendly reminders. My goal was to create an HOA that actually served the community rather than ruling over it. It turned out that people were eager for that kind of leadership. The complaints that came through the portal were mostly reasonable things like streetlights that needed repair, concerns about speeding cars, or requests for more community events. Nobody was trying to report their neighbors for having grass that was a quarter-inch too tall. One evening in November, almost 2 years after the snowblower theft, I was preparing for the first snowfall of the season when I got a phone call from an unfamiliar number. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Vincent. This is Rebecca Morrison." I was so surprised I almost dropped the phone. "Rebecca, I did not expect to hear from you. I know, I almost did not call, but I wanted to apologize." There was a long silence. I honestly had no idea what to say. "I was wrong," she continued, "about everything. Taking your snowblower, trying to blame you for following the rules, the harassment, the lawsuit, all of it. I let being HOA president go to my head, and I thought I could do whatever I wanted. When you held me accountable, I lashed out instead of taking responsibility. I am sorry." "Okay," I said, still processing. "I appreciate you saying that. I have been in therapy for the past year, working through a lot of issues. My therapist helped me realize that I had been using the HOA as a way to control things because my life felt out of control in other ways. That does not excuse what I did, but it helped me understand it. That is good. I am glad you are getting help. I heard you are the HOA president now. I bet you are doing a much better job than I ever did. I am just trying to be fair and reasonable with people. That is more than I managed. Anyway, I just wanted to say I am sorry. You did not deserve what I put you through. I hope you can forgive me someday." "I forgive you, Rebecca. What you did was wrong, but I do not carry any anger about it anymore. I hope things are going better for you now." "They are, thank you." "Take care, Vincent." She hung up, and I stood there in my garage staring at my phone. Of all the things I had expected to happen, getting an apology from Rebecca Morrison was not on the list, but it felt like a real closing to that chapter of my life. She had taken accountability, I had forgiven her, and we could both move on completely. The snow started falling later that evening, big fluffy flakes that accumulated quickly. I pulled out my trusty snowblower, gave it a quick once-over to make sure everything was in working order, and fired it up. The engine roared to life, and I smiled. This machine had been through a lot with me, and it was still going strong. As I cleared my driveway and started on Mrs. Chen's, I thought about how much had changed since that morning almost 2 years ago when I had discovered my snowblower missing. I had gone from being a relatively quiet, isolated homeowner to being HOA president with good relationships throughout the neighborhood. I had learned about standing up for myself, about the importance of evidence, about leadership and community. All because someone stole my snowblower, and I had the foresight to put a GPS tracker on it. I finished up the last driveway on my street and put the snowblower away. The tracker was still in its hiding spot, still charged, still faithfully monitoring the machine's location. I hoped I would never need it again, but I was glad it was there. As I walked into my house, shaking the snow off my boots, my phone buzzed with a message from Tom Whitfield. "Saw you out there clearing driveways again. That is what leadership looks like. Proud to have you as our president." I smiled and texted back my thanks. Then I made myself some hot chocolate, settled onto the couch, and turned on a hockey game. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the neighborhood in white. Inside, I was warm and content, knowing that I was part of a community that looked out for each other. The snowblower incident had taught me that doing the right thing, even when it is difficult, is always worth it in the end. Justice had been served, lessons had been learned, and positive change had come to our neighborhood. And all it took was a stolen snowblower, a clever GPS tracker, and a willingness to hold people accountable for their actions. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt genuinely grateful for how everything had turned out. It had been a long, strange journey from that morning when I discovered my missing snowblower to where I was now, but I would not change any of it. Well, maybe the spray-painted garage door. That had been a pain to fix, but everything else, even the difficult parts, had been worth it.